It was supposed to be just another quiet Sunday morning, the kind where nothing ever really happens. No sirens, no chaos. No reason to believe that a family's entire world had already collapsed while the rest of the neighborhood slept. But sometimes, the most devastating stories don't begin with screams or alarms. They begin with silence. Imagine this for a moment. A house that looks calm from the outside, curtains still drawn, doors locked, everything appearing normal. Inside, children wake up confused, sensing that something isn't right. Their mother won't respond. Their father is nowhere to be found. And within minutes, a peaceful street transforms into the epicenter of a mystery that seasoned investigators would struggle to explain. What makes this case unsettling isn't just what happened, it's how carefully it unfolded. No forced entry, no struggle, no obvious signs of rage, just precision, planning, and a disappearance that seems almost intentional. This is not a story about a crime of passion. It's a story about control, silence, and the moment when a carefully constructed life quietly implodes. And once you step inside this house, every detail will force you to ask the same question investigators did from the very beginning. How did no one see this coming? The quiet of that Sunday morning shattered the moment the children stepped outside the house on Cherry Street. 4 of them, still in pajamas, ranging from toddler to elementary school age, walked down the steps and crossed over to their neighbor's door. There was no panic in their voices when they knocked. No screaming, just confusion. They said they couldn't find their father. They said their mother was upstairs crying, and she wouldn't wake up. That detail alone would later haunt investigators. When police arrived and entered the house, they immediately noticed what wasn't there. No signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no damage. The home, a large historic structure built in the 1800s, felt still, almost preserved. Upstairs in the master bedroom, they found Brienne lying on the bed. Her body position looked natural, as if she had simply fallen asleep. There were no defensive wounds, no overturned furniture, no chaos. Only after closer examination did the reality emerge. A gunshot wound to her face, fired at extremely close range. Death had been instantaneous. Then came the detail that changed everything. On the bedroom floor, near the bed, investigators found 3 spent 9mm shell casings. 3. But Brienne had only one visible wound. There were no bullet holes in the walls, no impact marks in the ceiling, no damage to furniture, nothing that explained where the other rounds went. That discrepancy immediately ruled out an impulsive act. It suggested hesitation, malfunction, or repeated trigger pulls before the fatal shot. Whatever happened in that room was not loud, chaotic, or rushed. It was controlled. The house itself told the same story. Windows locked from the inside, doors secure. The only exit used that morning was the kitchen door, the same one the children had used to leave the house. Every other access point was sealed. For detectives, that eliminated the possibility of an intruder almost instantly. Whoever did this didn't need to break in. They already belonged there. And one person was missing. Aaron Pennington. So was Brienne's handgun. And so was Aaron's white BMW, which had been parked in the driveway just hours earlier. Within minutes, the investigation shifted from a suspicious death to an active manhunt. As officers documented the scene, something else stood out. The bedroom was unnervingly clean. Not just tidy, sterile. No signs of emotional escalation. No evidence of a fight. No scattered items. It didn't look like a crime scene born from anger. It looked like a room where someone had been very careful. Forensic teams collected DNA, fingerprints, fibers. Everything inside the home matched only members of the family. There was no foreign presence. The conclusion became unavoidable. This was a closed environment, a controlled space, a deliberate act carried out by someone who knew exactly where everything was, including the firearm. Investigators confirmed that Aaron had legal access to the gun. He knew where it was stored, and there were no signs of him searching for it in a panic. No forced draws, no rushed movement. That reinforced the emerging theory. This wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. To understand how a family reached this point, detectives began reconstructing the months leading up to that morning. 16 months earlier, the Pennington family had relocated from California to Massachusetts. On the surface, it looked like a fresh start. Aaron had accepted a new professional position. Brienne had finally achieved something she had dreamed about for years, owning and restoring a historic New England home. She embraced the project fully, documenting renovations, sharing progress photos, and throwing herself into transforming the property. She wasn't just restoring the house, she was building a life inside it. Brienne came from a rural background in Texas. She was disciplined, physically capable, creative. She balanced hands-on restoration work with motherhood, cosmetics, and personal projects. She raised chickens, turned the backyard into a homestead, and poured herself into the home. From the outside, it looked like dedication. But inside, something was shifting. Massachusetts was isolating for her. No nearby family, limited social connections. Her world became increasingly confined to the house, the children, and a religious community that emphasized endurance over escape. Investigators later learned that by early 2023, Brienne had begun quietly discussing plans to leave. She wanted to return to Texas. She was setting aside money. She was looking for support. She was planning a future that didn't include staying in that house forever. Aaron, meanwhile, was unraveling. His career trajectory had taken a sharp. After years in military aviation and specialized roles requiring discipline and control, he left his civilian defense position. The reasons were never publicly explained, but the impact was clear. Unemployment followed, financial pressure mounted. His mental health deteriorated. He expressed thoughts of self-harm. Friends noticed changes in his behavior. Tension inside the marriage intensified. And then there was his background. Aaron wasn't just former military. He had training designed for survival, evasion, and operating without detection. Skills meant for extreme circumstances. Skills that would later explain why, once he vanished, there were no digital traces. No phone pings, no card usage, no obvious trail. As the marriage strained, their religious framework complicated everything. Within that structure, separation wasn't just a legal matter, it was a spiritual failure. Counseling prioritized preserving the marriage. Authority favored hierarchy, and Brienne's desire to leave placed her in direct conflict with expectations that rewarded endurance, not autonomy. By the weeks leading up to October, the tension was no longer hidden. Aaron knew Brienne planned to leave. He had shown interest in the firearm. Friends described the household as heavy, like everyone was waiting for something to snap. On social media, Aaron presented calm, stability, normalcy. But behind that image was a man losing control over the one thing his identity was built around: Brienne. For years, his online presence had revolved entirely around her. She wasn't just his partner, she was his anchor, his purpose, his validation, his sense of worth. Over time, that devotion turned one-sided. She stopped responding, stopped engaging. And silence, to someone whose identity is fused to another person, can feel like annihilation. What investigators uncovered next removed any doubt about intent. Inside Aaron's digital records was a document created the night before Brienne died. Time-stamped, saved, written in first person. It wasn't a diary entry. It wasn't emotional. It was procedural. Step by step, instructions, contingencies, even a prepared excuse in case she woke up. The language was cold, clinical. The final objective unmistakable. This wasn't a moment of rage, it was rehearsal. From that moment forward, everything that happened inside the house followed a script already written. He waited for the quiet hours. He prepared for resistance. He minimized noise. And after the shot, he didn't run. He stayed. He waited. He allowed time to pass so that his departure would blend into the rhythm of a normal Sunday morning. At 8:50 a.m., a security camera captured his BMW pulling away. One person inside. Behind him, 4 children remained in the house, unaware that their lives had just been permanently fractured. And ahead of him, a landscape perfectly suited for someone trained to disappear. The search was about to become something far more complex than anyone initially expected. What followed was not a frantic escape, it was calculated distance. When the white BMW disappeared from Cherry Street, investigators initially assumed the vehicle would surface quickly. Gas stations, toll cameras, highway exits, some kind of digital breadcrumb. But hours passed, then an entire day, and there was nothing. No credit card use, no phone activity, no license plate hits. It was as if Aaron Pennington had stepped off the modern world the moment he left his driveway. That illusion shattered late the following afternoon. A local resident, out bow hunting in a wooded area outside town, noticed something that didn't belong. Tucked deep into a dead-end dirt path, far from any public roadway, sat a white BMW. The car wasn't abandoned randomly. It was positioned deliberately, hidden from casual view, shielded by dense trees and uneven terrain. The location wasn't accidental either. The property, a sprawling woodland used by scouting groups, was rugged, isolated, and difficult to navigate. For law enforcement, this discovery changed everything. The search immediately escalated. Nearby residents were ordered to stay inside and lock their doors. Helicopters were deployed. Canine units were brought in. Hundreds of acres were marked for systematic sweeps. The assumption was clear. The suspect had exited the vehicle and continued on foot. And this is where Aaron's past became critically relevant. He wasn't just someone running from the consequences of a crime. He was someone trained to avoid detection. His military background included survival techniques designed specifically for environments like this: dense forests, uneven ground, unpredictable weather. He knew how to move without leaving obvious tracks, how to manage body heat, how to avoid being seen from above, how to outlast search efforts. Infrared-equipped helicopters scanned the area, but the terrain worked against them. Thick foliage, moisture-heavy ground, ravines and rocky formations interfered with thermal imaging. Canine units faced overlapping scent trails created by wildlife and intersecting paths. What should have been an overwhelming show of force slowly turned into a frustrating stalemate. Hours turned into days, then weeks. Investigators began to reconstruct what happened inside the house before he left. Not just the crime itself, but the psychology behind it. The most disturbing detail wasn't the gun, or the plan, or even the disappearance. It was the waiting. After Brienne was killed, Aaron didn't flee immediately. He remained inside the home for hours. The same home where his children slept in nearby rooms. Authorities believe this was intentional. A pause designed to let shock settle, to let the night fade into morning, to let his exit blend into routine. When the children woke up, he didn't create a scene. He didn't run, he relied on misdirection. He told them their mother was crying and wouldn't wake up. That explanation wasn't random. It exploited what had become normal in the household. Emotional strain, silence, walking on eggshells. That hesitation gave him a head start. By the time the children sought help, he was already gone. Behavioral analysts describe this kind of act as a transfer of responsibility. He didn't force the children to discover the truth directly, but he also didn't stop it. He created distance, both physical and psychological, between himself and the aftermath. As the manhunt stalled, authorities broadened their focus. If he hadn't died in the woods, where could he be? They examined financial records for signs of preparation. Cash withdrawals, account closures, anything that suggested long-term planning. At the same time, they considered the alternative, that the forest itself was the final destination. Dive teams were brought in to search nearby bodies of water. Sonar scanned lake beds. The possibility of self-harm remained on the table, especially given his prior statements. But no body surfaced, no weapon was found, no trace emerged. As days passed without answers, attention turned back to the dynamics that led here. Experts familiar with similar cases recognized a familiar pattern. A man whose identity was fused to his partner, a life structured around control, order, and hierarchy. When that structure began to collapse, unemployment, loss of authority, threat of separation, the response wasn't adaptation, it was annihilation. Not just of her, but of the version of reality he couldn't live without. This pattern has a name in behavioral psychology. It describes individuals who see their family not as independent people, but as extensions of themselves. When the family unit no longer serves that identity, destruction becomes a means of preservation. If the world can't exist as it was imagined, then it shouldn't exist at all. In these cases, outward appearances often deceive. Public devotion, religious commitment, community involvement, none of it contradicts the internal narrative. In fact, it often reinforces it. The higher the pedestal, the greater the perceived fall. Brienne's attempts to reclaim autonomy, to move closer to family, to build a future outside the constraints of that environment, represented something Aaron could not tolerate: loss of control. And control, once lost, became the motive. The tragedy also reignited difficult conversations around insular belief systems and how conflict is handled within them. Former members and researchers have long pointed out how emphasis on endurance and marital preservation can unintentionally silence warning signs. When hierarchy discourages intervention and suffering is reframed as spiritual duty, victims can become isolated at the moment they most need support. In this case, Brienne's isolation was geographic, emotional, and structural. Far from family, tethered to a demanding home, embedded in a system that prioritized unity over safety. By the time she began planning an exit, the risk had already escalated. Today, the house on Cherry Street stands empty, the renovation halted, the homestead abandoned. What was once a symbol of hope is now a physical reminder of a life interrupted. The children, still so young, are left with fragments. A mother who never woke up, a father who vanished, a home that will never feel safe again. Their future is now shaped by courts, guardianship decisions, and trauma they're far too young to understand. And the question remains unanswered. Is Aaron Pennington still alive? Did he vanish into the wilderness using everything he was trained to do? Or did he choose an ending that denied everyone else closure? For investigators, this is no longer just a search. It's a waiting game. One that hinges on time, chance, and the possibility that someone, somewhere, will notice something that doesn't quite fit. Until then, the case remains open. No arrest, no recovery, no resolution. Just a quiet street, an empty house, and a man trained to disappear. If this story made you pause, I want to hear from you. Do you believe he's still out there, or do you think the forest already holds the answer? Drop your thoughts below, and if you found this breakdown valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue exploring the stories that are too complex to ignore.